to the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. The best and brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes. We'll talk to them all, and we'll get the good, the bad, and the ugly on how they made it. Decoding the secrets of success. And now your host, Terry Barr.
So welcome back to Grind and Growth to Greatness. I'm your host, Terry Barr. I have a really interesting guest today, actually two guests today, State Senator Mike Regan, and he is here with us with his wife, Fran. And we're going to talk to them a little bit about his and their dog. What's your dog's name?
Willie.
Willie the dog is involved in this interview, so he's checking everything out. He's off camera right now, so we're becoming fast friends. But Mike Regan is a state senator. I found out recently he's going to retire as a state senator, so we'll get into that a little bit. And Fran is a mom of four, but she's also got a whole bunch of things on her resume that we'd like to talk about. And she's got a recent appointment, and so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I want to get right into it with Mike and Fran Regan. How we doing, guys?
Good. How are you,
good.
Terry?
Very, very good. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, pleasure.
We got here a little early, and I asked them if they wanted to be on camera, and Fran said, well, maybe not. So we convinced her to go ahead and get on camera. She looks great. Tell us a little bit about your past. Started growing up, grew up in Camp Hill area.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. And then, Fran, on the tail end of that, I'll have you tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up.
Sounds good.
And how we connect the dots there.
Yeah. So I grew up in the Camp Hill area, Camp Hill Post Office, but not Camp Hill Borough, over by Holy Spirit Hospital, and Riverview Heights was the name of the neighborhood. You know, I have four sisters, and we had a pretty interesting life in that. My youngest sister, Mary, was born with a congenital heart disease, and she ultimately passed away like at age 45 from all the complications that came from she club foot, cleft palate, all these things that were wrong with her. But, a lot of our childhood, I think, was, around Mary's health. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she worked, I think, full-time, trying to do what she could do to keep my sister alive.
Yeah.
So it was that was a little part of it, but a lot of great friends in the neighborhood, and still stay in touch with a lot of them, and played sports, all through elementary school, middle school, high school, and pretty average.
So you grew up here and you really never moved away. I mean, you kind of went away to college right?
Yeah, I went away to college, but also went away with the U.S. Marshal Service. I went to Miami and worked in Miami for a couple of years. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about that, but back to your childhood with your sister and how that kind of molded your family. I know we talked about how that had an effect on you, made you become a little more self-sustaining.
Yeah.
I guess. And talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I think, because my mom was preoccupied, it caused all of us to become, I think, a little bit more independent. I think if you would ask my wife, one of my strengths is that I'm an independent, not only that, but an independent thinker too. And I think which has helped me out in politics. I'm not one who's just going to go by what the party line or whatever.
Quo, yeah.
So I think that was sometimes difficult growing up, but I think it paid dividends as I got older, and I didn't feel like I had to check with anyone to make decisions because I was used to doing it.
How old were you when Mary passed?
Oh, I was older. I was, I think, around 51.
Oh, so she
lived into her 40s. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. She was sick throughout her life, especially when she was a child.
Yeah.
So you obviously knew Mary?
Yes.
For a long period of time.
Oh, yeah. When Mike and I started dating, she was about 20 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, just 2 years younger than me.
I'll jump forward a little bit. When did you guys meet? Where did you start?
We met at Shippensburg University.
Okay.
So she came in
psychology class.
abnormal psych class.
Okay.
And she would come in and as she'd just gotten out of the shower and her hair was wet. And I used to sit behind her and just stare at the back of her head, with good and bad thoughts.
I think that's what love does to you, right? I don't care. I just want to meet this girl.
Yeah. So finally one day I got the nerve up to ask her out. And
and
I knew from that first date that I was going to marry her. And that was 35 years ago.
No, 40.
40 years ago.
That
was 40 years ago. We've been married for 35 years. That's right.
Well, one of the things when I looked you up and I was starting to do a little research, one of the things I noticed online anyway, and that's where typically I get everything, is, you seem to really love each other.
Yeah, thanks.
You really exude that. You say it. You're verbal about it. I think that's a good example. Your kids know it. Obviously, they've got to know that mom and dad really love each other. It's a great thing.
There's a fair amount of hate in there too, though.
Yeah. We're both hotheads. We both want to be the boss. So that leads to same fights that we've been having for 40 years. We still have every day.
That's interesting. Maybe that's another podcast.
Two type A personalities. That's what happens.
That's tough. Type A is, in my business, real estate agents are all type A. They're all drivers. They all want to do it their own way. And boy, that gets into some serious conversations at times. Yeah.
And then when your type A guy becomes a senator, that's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah. Did that make you have to step back and say, now I either got to up my game or what happened there?
I would just have to constantly remind him that at home he was not senator. He was just Mike, their dad, and the trash man, and the car fixer.
That sounds familiar.
What about your kids? What did they think about dad becoming a senator?
You know what? My kids really, truly could not care less about that. I mean,
it's funny.
There's been very many different levels of it. One of them started when they were like kind of little. And I was when I'd go knocking on doors to get signatures on a petition, because you need to get, you're supposed to get 300, but they say you should get double.
Right.
So, and that was kind of arduous, and it was cold out, and people wouldn't open the door for me. They'd look out and see me standing there and wouldn't open the door. So I'd bring the kids.
Don't tell me you use your kids to get in the door.
I did. Used to be my children. And Brooke was the only one who was like methodical about it. She had a clipboard and she would check things off and everything. Wow. And people would open the door for the kids, but then they got tired of it. And every time I say, "Who's going with me?" they all burst into tears.
Yeah. It was fun for a while.
Yeah, and then it got old.
Now, did you ever go on knocking doors with him?
I did a lot of door knocking, yes. Particularly when he had that tight Senate race. It was really a lot of fun. And that's not something I particularly thought I wanted to do or that I'd be good at, but since I really believed in Mike and really thought that he was the best man for the job, it was fun. We'd even knock on doors that had signs for the opponent in the yard and would say, "Hey, why are you going to vote that way? Let me just tell you about my husband, Mike."
So we had a policy guy with her. So she would be the wife mother.
Yeah.
And
the emotional connection.
And the guy could spot my positions on things.
Like
Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah.
They're a good team.
That's really interesting. And that was how many years ago that you?
That was 8 years ago.
8 years ago.
Yeah.
So you've been a state senator for a while now,
and
I think I'm all right to say that you retire. You're going to retire.
Yeah, I think the way the rule works, and November 30th will be my last day. Yeah.
And you're pretty certain of that.
Yeah, it's done. I mean, we just had the primary, so there's somebody else set to go. Yeah.
Yesterday.
Yeah, Don Kiefer is going to be the Republican nominee, or is the Republican nominee.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So looking back at your career, I know you stood for some great things. You were in the Marshal Service, so you were a law and order kind of guy. Tell me about the couple items that you kind of ran on and lived on as a senator that were important to you.
I think probably medical marijuana was the first kind of like a landmark piece of legislation that I was. So the medical side of it was, I'm going to go back to probably the year 2014. And we had somebody in the Senate. I was in the House at the time. Somebody in the Senate proposed a bill. And the House was a hard no. Mike Terzai was the leader at the time, and he was a no. And there was not much support for it. And I was kind of on the fence. And I just did some research. And at the same time, we had these kids who had epilepsy, were walking the halls with their parents, and the parents had to illegally use marijuana to help with their kids' seizures. And it wasn't typical. It was oil. They would put a couple drops of oil in a piece of fudge and give it to their kids, and it would keep them from having seizures. So, I mean, that kind of really worked on me a little bit. Like, why are we depriving this for people who really need it? And, it was a long process, but I walked the halls and talked to a lot of people. And because I had been a U.S. Marshal for 23 years, people would listen to me. And we talked about, there was a kind of a reefer madness sentiment at that point in time. And we kind of broke through it. We were able to get enough support and enough co-sponsors on a piece of legislation that Mike Terzai eventually relented,
Mm-hmm.
and the bill ran and passed and became law. And I still, to this day, have people approach me at the gym or at the grocery store and whatever and say, thanks so much, my granddaughter, or my daughter, or myself.
Yeah.
This woman approached me. I was at a clothing store one time and said she had neuropathy and she was on opioids and bedridden. And ever since the advent of medical marijuana, she's working again and feels so much better. It was really a kind of rewarding experience.
Yeah, it's in some ways it's kind of ironic that your law and order guy was going around saying, "Hey, we need to pass this."
Yeah.
I met you probably back in 2014, and you probably don't remember, but you were with Adam Brenneman. He was my
campaign manager at the time.
At the time. And I met you at Starbucks. And I had seen something you had talked about medical marijuana, and I asked you about it. And you said, you talked about the benefits of it, and I wasn't really convinced until I started to look into it myself. I ran into a guy that had Parkinson's disease. He was utilizing it, and it was something that helped him an awful lot. And, of course, the more we talk about the opioid crisis across the country and all the people that are dying and all the synthetic drugs that drives the pharmaceutical companies, I think, here we've got a natural drug that, if used correctly and synthesized correctly, is so much better off than anything else. Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of changed my tune, partly, obviously, because you kind of tripped my interest and my curiosity. And so I don't know, I still haven't used it myself. And I've got lots of chronic pain from sports and other things, but if I ever get to that point, I might have to.
Well, one of the things we said in doctors, there's, because of the state law and the way it's no banks, you can't use any banks or anything like that. It's still almost like it's not right. And you can get charged with a DUI for using medical marijuana. I mean, so there's wrinkles that need to be ironed out still along the way. But I'll say this, it's another tool in a doctor's toolbox that they can try. I will back up and say that Pennsylvania is one of the only states that has clinical research portion of this, where they're doing different hospitals around the state are partnered with a grower processor, and they're doing clinical research on different things. Yeah. And I'll tell you, there's things going on that they're talking about, that the research that is just, it's really feel good stuff. Yeah. And it's great.
It's really interesting because we've gotten to the point that I feel like, and of course I'm somewhat of a conspiracy theorist, that, here the government has nothing but to gain when it comes to the pharmaceuticals. They have nothing to gain from marijuana because it's legal or illegal. And yet I look at Colorado, they legalized everything, and they've had some problems, societal problems as a result of it. So, but I think if you put, like you said, put it in the hands of docs, and it's able to, to be monitored and to be researched and those kinds of things, I don't see why we're not already there.
Yeah, I think we're it's a slow process. Pennsylvania does everything incrementally, traditionally, and I think that we're in the process of being onto something, I think, really good. But it takes time. We empowered a government agency to be the rule makers, which was probably a mistake. I mean, it seemed normal. The Department of Health should do it, but it's a bureaucracy. Sure. And when you're doing things like this, I mean, I was in a room with a group of legislators, and we had a medical marijuana task force, and I was on it. And we were the ones, not a doctor among us, who were deciding on what ailments would be legal to take medical marijuana, and how ridiculous is that? So some of them was based on things we'd read and seen. I mean, there was a little bit. It wasn't just like,
isn't that typical though?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's so ridiculous. But now we put a caveat in the law that if research shows that it can help another thing, then you can expand it. You can apply to expand it. So the list has expanded quite a bit. So
kind of amended.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Without having to go through the legislative process. It was through a committee's vote on that at the Department of Health. So, we're making progress, and it's a big thing. Medical marijuana is legal in every state around us right now, except for West Virginia. So we have.
That's also ironic.
Yeah.
What do you have any thoughts on that, Fran? On the legalization of medical marijuana?
Yes. Well, I also had a background in law enforcement. I have 26 years in as a federal probation officer, so did a lot of work with people who went to jail for a long time for the sale and use of marijuana. So when Mike first told me that he was going to be, kind of more or less switching course on that as a senator,
Because as a House member at the time.
Yeah, House member. I was really taken aback by it. And then we sat down and he told me about this long discussion that he had with this fellow politician who kind of educated him on what it would mean to have a medical marijuana and how it's helped. And I think, too, a lot of people gave Mike some grief about that because they're not.
I still get it.
Yeah. But anybody who will sit down and actually listen and be open-minded and not just look at it as an illegal drug will see that it was the right course of action. And particularly when you're asking people, okay, so let's say your young kid has epilepsy and is having 100 seizures a day, and you go from 100 seizures a day to 1 seizure a day or 0 seizures a day. You're willing to say, I don't want my kid to have medical marijuana because it should be illegal. So it was all about educating it. And I think it was a very brave thing for Mike to do, being a law enforcement and being a Republican. But I think people also were more likely to listen to him because they realized that they knew that if this was something he was for, there had to be something behind it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point that you say that because, I mean, typically, Republicans are always going to land on the side of, no, we're not going to do that. We're a little more conservative that way. And for you to take that leap to get into it. And we talked the last time we talked about, I wanted to get into this business. We'll call it a business to really make a difference. And I think most politicians get into the business to make a difference. Some of them say, well, I can't make a difference, but this is a great living. And some of them say, maybe it's time to retire. And so it's interesting that as a Republican, you have some background in, okay, I'm going to have an open mind about this, and I'm going to go do my own research. And then you were able to convince other Republicans that, hey, we need to think about that.
Yeah, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. I know we talked about it, violence in schools and that kind of thing. I know you're a big proponent of preparing teachers. We call it preparing teachers and school folks to defend the children, whether it's with a firearm or other things. But you were a big proponent of that, I think, and I would like to hear what you're at on that.
Well, I mean, I think less about the teachers protecting the kids. I mean, they would do it in a certain way, I guess, but under my plan, it would be to have an armed, trained, vetted officer in every school.
Why is there such a pushback on that?
Well, I mean, I think if I can be perfectly honest, I think part of it is the teachers' unions don't want it because they believe that any money that's spent in the schools should be spent in hiring teachers and dues payers, as opposed to law enforcement officials who would not be part of that union.
Yeah, you say teachers don't want it, but aren't we talking about
teachers' unions? Yeah, teachers' unions, yes.
I'm not a big union guy either because I think unions miss the boat on a lot of things because they have to be relevant and to continue to get their dues. And I think that's terrible. Do you see any kind of productive move towards that end?
I do. Again, the incremental process. I mean, I got my bill passed in the Senate, which there was no way we were going to get it done with an armed officer in every school. So we had to backtrack and say an armed officer in every district. So about half schools had already done something like that. So now we're working with it. It could be a budget item. We don't think it won't pass the House because it's a Democrat-controlled House, and Democrats are not for it because the unions are not for it. So it's going to have to happen as a budget issue, as a negotiation in the budget. And Joe Pittman, who's the leader, strongly believes with me on this issue, and he promised me that he was going to try to make it a budget issue. So we'll see in the school code, put it in the school code because they're asking for an awful lot. They're asking for a huge amount of money. And this will be an ask of ours that we get it done. And that will be step one towards, we've done things in the past. We had a piece of legislation that created an agency within PCCD, which deals directly with school security grants. We have funded it up to about $800 million where schools can apply. There's a kind of a triage where you go through these tiers. And you can't go to tier 2 to go through tier 1 and like hardening entries and things like this. And they can apply for grants. That's been very successful. But there's been many schools that don't even apply because they don't believe, for whatever reason, some of it is they don't want guns in schools. They don't think guns should be in school and different reasons. I don't know the complete rationale, but there are things. So Democrats typically have been against doing it.
Sure.
which is now that the Democrats control the House, it makes it a difficult proposition. Yeah. But with that said, I think we're heading down that road where it might get done at some point in the near future.
So, Fran, as a mom of 4, now your kids are mostly grown, I would say. We'd call them grown at different ages. You have 4 children. And got one abroad, right?
Yes, yes.
2 in college, or do we have 3 in college?
One's in college, getting ready to graduate. Oh, 2 in college.
2 in college.
Right.
Yeah.
One just started. Yeah, one's abroad and one. Well, he's going to graduate.
What's his name again?
He's going to graduate next week.
Yeah.
Right, and then one local. That's ages 18 to 29.
There you go. So, as a mom of 4, you go back to when they were little guys. What do you think about the whole armed guard in school? What's your take on that from a mom?
I think it's so sad that it's come to this, but I think it needs to be done. I really, really believe that that how's that saying go? The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And I think it's unfortunate, but the reality is that we need to have an armed guard in schools.
When they got armed guards at Northern, did you feel better about
that?
Yeah,
and our kids, they had an armed guard at Northern High School. One of the benefits of having him, the kids all loved him.
Yeah.
But he would find things out. He just knew what was going on in and around the school.
Had a sense of kind of the vibe of what's going on.
Great intelligence gatherers.
Right. And I think the same thing would be true at the elementary school. I mean, it's a great time too for younger kids to interact with the police officers, see what they're all about, especially in today's climate where, police officers get a lot of bad press. Yeah. So I definitely would have felt more comfortable with that.
Yeah, my wife's, she's a principal at a school in Northern Virginia, elementary school. Yeah. And it's locked down pretty good. I can't get into the lobby without, seeing somebody. But somebody does get in, it's just as hard to get out. Yeah. So I'm kind of that ilk that I would, it seems like it would be best to have somebody, even a presence, a visual presence
exactly
is going to keep people.
It's certainly a deterrence.
Yeah.
I mean, the most recent school shooter, she had a manifesto. And one of the entries in her manifesto was that she picked the school she picked because she knew there was no armed guards.
No gun zone.
Yeah. No gun zone. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's a brilliant strategy, isn't it?
It seems like an honest strategy.
Yeah.
Pretty easy to do that.
So, the thing that kind of irks me is that the very people that are against this are voting for budgets that provide them armed security in the Capitol.
We just talk about that. Everybody's got armed security in everything.
Yeah, the governor is a no on this. He said he'd veto a bill that came to him. That's why we're going the school code way. But he has said that he'd veto it, and we spend $15 million a year with security guards, state troopers who surround him 24 hours a day. There hasn't been a governor killed in office since the year 1900. And he wasn't even in office. He was a governor-elect who was killed in office. So, look, I don't know if that's because there's not a threat on the governor or it's because he's got an armed detail. Yeah. Once you give kids, on the other hand, there's been 200 killed in schools just in Sandy Hook. 200 kids killed in schools since Sandy Hook. So that was 2012. Yeah, and
I feel like the left kind of, every time I turn around, and I honestly don't listen to a lot of the news because I have to have an upbeat attitude, and when I don't, oh gosh, it just brings me down. But it seems like the other side of the aisle, if I will, and there's a lot of them out there, I'm sure that will listen to this, but the politicians just use that to push their own agenda. They use the school shootings. Oh, got to get rid of guns.
Right.
That's the first thing. And quite frankly, I mean, I know the statistics on all the no gun zones across the country. Those are the places where criminals go. And the only people that have guns are the criminals.
Exactly right.
I wish there was a way to get the quote-unquote truth out there. I know there's a lot of online media like the Becks and the other people that kind of have a side door to the media, to the truth. But I wonder what that looks like going forward as far as...
Yeah, I don't know the answer, because if you're not willing to understand that the black market exists, heroin's illegal, right? So, but there's 11 people dying every day of heroin overdoses in Pennsylvania, so with fentanyl, but it's illegal. So you make guns illegal, it just automatically opens up a black market. And probably the law-abiding citizens aren't the one who'd be willing to go access the black market. It would be the criminal who currently utilize the black market. So what you'd have then is armed criminals and unarmed.
Yeah.
People.
And that seems like that's been the mantra for years.
Yeah.
And yet we can't seem to get to a place where society says, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, the last time we talked, I didn't know that you were going to retire.
Yeah.
So
I knew, but I wasn't ready to tell anybody.
And that's cool. I can appreciate that. So tell me what ultimately, I'm sure there's lots of factors. Fran and your 4 kids are growing up. You got 2 boys playing football, and you got somebody abroad, and your young one here, and all the family stuff, I would assume, is part of it. But tell me what the factors were that you finally said, you know what, I've been in service for a long time. It's time for Mike Regan to get out.
It was less about the job and more about my family. If I was going to run again, I would be running during football season. Coming up, my son's a freshman football player, James Madison, and I would have to miss a lot of that, and I will not do that. I knew that was a non-starter. So that was the biggest thing that was driving it. But, 35 years of service, 23 as U.S. Marshal, and then 12 in the legislature. And it's becoming more and more contentious, more and more.
Last time we talked, you said something to that effect.
Yeah.
Used to be we could disagree, go out for dinner or a drink and really kind of get after it a little bit, find some compromise and those kinds of things. But the last conversation we had, you said, it's just, if you're on that side, then I'm on this side.
Yeah.
And you can't get anything done. So is that kind of what you're trying to?
Yeah. It's just more difficult. It's less, I can't ever really say it was really fun, but we did have agreeable relationships, and we did have a little bit of fun, and we did talk about things. When I was in House of Representatives, so we had a huge majority of Republicans, and they pushed me over to the Democratic side. So I sat on the end row of the Democrat side.
We're out of space. You're down here.
We're out of space. and I developed so many friendships with the guys, with the Democratic side, and those relationships still last today. But that's
such a good lesson, though, for young people, young adults. You don't understand somebody, you're not in their world. Get in their world.
Yeah.
Because that's when you become friends, or you build relationships, you have an understanding. And in today's age, that's not happening. People are saying, family members are saying, you vote for this person and they'll come to dinner.
Yeah.
And that to me is just a lack of empathy for someone else's opinion.
But, and also, I was saying about, the labor unions and the Democrats caused me some frustration with it. Yeah. But it's people typically vote their district. It's so Pennsylvania is such a widely diverse state. So you can have the guy from in Pickett County in the Northwest who's super conservative, but then you have the Southeast where you have a more liberal. You should represent your
birds of a feather flock together.
That's what it is. So you're going to have varying views, and my view is certainly backwards in their perspective. So it's the way it is. But I will say this is that we used to have a way of. There's an old saying: the minority gets their say and the majority gets their way. And we kind of operated it with kind of a homeostasis, with that for a long time. But now it's just so divided, and it keeps people from talking to each other. But, the system is kind of set up that way. I remember when I was a brand new member of the House of Representatives, and you spend about 2 hours out of your orientation all together, and then they segregate you. Republicans go here, Democrats go here. You're on the Irvis office building. First floor is Republicans, second floor is Democrats, third floor is Republicans. So they keep you separated from each other. I always thought, let's put everyone together. Put offices side by side and see what happens, and those relationships, just by human nature, they develop, and I don't think it can help but make things better.
This episode of Grind to Growth to Greatness is brought to you by Terry Barr, Distinctive Real Estate, advising families across Pennsylvania and Northern Virginia for over 15 years. Visit the website at terrybarrealestate.com.
So, Fran, you've been recently appointed.
3 years ago, right?
Yeah, 3 years. This is my second term.
Second term. Tell me about that. Tell me what that's all about for you. The Gaming Commission, right?
Yes, the Gaming Control Board.
Control Board, okay.
Right, so dealing with the casinos that we have in the state. Yeah, it's been very interesting. I'm on a board there are 7 total members, and we meet a couple days a month and have public meetings once a month. But it's been very interesting to learn about the casino business and gambling and how the tax revenue that comes with that. And so it's something I didn't know a whole lot about, but been a real learning curve.
What's the driving factor on that board? Is it to control the casinos? Is it to
regulate them,
make sure that they're paying their dues, or whatever? Tell me about the.
Well, and they really work. The board has a really great relationship, I think, with the casino industry. We deal with infractions within the casinos, and it's so interesting to me that the casinos, they're the ones that they self-police, they advise us, and they will, let us know, hey, we had this happen. We had some excluded people that were able to gamble, or some underage people. So I think that
you can't lose that license, Terry.
Yeah, it's very profitable. Very profitable. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the money coming in, and the hoops that they jump through in order to be able to open casinos. Yeah. It's just really, really fascinating, and the tax revenue is mind blowing. So still learning.
So you got one more year.
Yes, I'll be finishing up around the same time as Mike.
And then what?
Well,
or maybe
we're hoping she gets reappointed.
If I get another, you have to. The maximum is 6 years. So if I had another
so you're hoping to get another appointment.
That would be great. Yeah. But if not, it's funny. I don't know. I've been retired from my job as a federal probation officer for 8 years now, and I feel more busy than I ever was. Just there's like so many things that I'm interested in. I do some personal training. We run the women's self-defense classes. So there's so many
you got into all my little statements here. So you're involved in a lot of things.
Yes.
And you seem to really enjoy getting out and getting dirty and grinding. I saw you did the rim to rim.
Right.
And one of my favorite guys to follow is Jesse Itzler. And he just did a rim to rim with like 5 or 6 of his friends in 20 hours.
Oh wow. Gosh,
so, nutcase. So when I saw you,
whole different thing.
Yeah. Right? When you did that, I was like, that's pretty awesome.
She's an Iron Man too. I don't know if you knew that.
I've seen you go through Iron Man. So that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. That's my stress reduction. Yeah. When we had the 4 little kids to, be able to get out and do something physical is always something I've loved to do.
When did you start that extreme sports? Did you start that as a related?
Well, no, I was always really loved athletics. I ran track for a little bit in college, but started to do the trail racing when the kids were little. And the thing that was so great about it, Terry, was that, it's stressful. You have 4 kids in the house and a husband and dogs and cats and everything. But when you do these trail races that are really very technical, they're the elevation's unbelievable. You got rocks and roots and creeks and things you got to jump over. And so it was like a freeing of my mind where I could focus on.
You have to focus.
Yeah,
right?
Focus. I didn't kill myself.
Yeah,
which was just really very
therapeutic, right?
Yeah, very, very therapeutic.
Now, Mike, do you do any of that kind of thing?
No, I go when she's doing these races. I find the nicest town nearby, and I go shop in men's stores and get coffee. And
biggest cheerleader. I love it. Very supportive, and then always
she's proud of it's fun. She wins too. That's the fun part. She's a winner. Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was fun.
Hold on. Can we go back to the gaming control board thing?
Forward. Yes.
So there was controversy. Let me tell you how it all shook out. So Jake Corman was the president pro tem of the Senate. Yeah. And we were at a dinner party for something. It was maybe a political fundraiser or something. I'm not sure. And Fran was seated next to him. Yeah. And it was right around the time where we were talking about probation reform in government. And he knew what she did. Yeah. And she was so good at it. And he started shooting questions at her. Yeah. And she was answering in them. And it turned into an involved conversation. And that was it. Yeah. So one day he calls me and says, we have an opening on the gaming control board. He said, but it's a quasi-judicial position. And your wife seems like she'd be perfect for it. I was talking to her about all these things judicial, and she was very astute. He goes, do you think she'd be interested? I said, I don't know. Here's her cell phone number. Give her a call. He called her, and they worked it out. And that was, it's interesting how a Republican's wife qualified, very, extremely qualified for the position. All of a sudden, it was nothing but political patronage and things like that. Typically, you put a qualified woman in a job, it's celebrated, right? Yeah. Certainly not in this case. And
not in this day and age. Yeah. If you're on the wrong side, they don't celebrate it.
Exactly.
So it was really an eye-opener. And I didn't even think about the blowback initially until my chief of staff said, there's going to be a blowback on this. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're probably right. And, of course, the most liberal reporter in Harrisburg writes this scathing story about it. And it's interesting to me. Then your political opponents latch onto it. And, it was one of those things. But, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. But
it's a political wash machine. It happens in everything that we run into. It doesn't matter what your response is. It doesn't matter how above board you are. If they can find that as leverage
Exactly.
on either side in a lot of cases.
Twist it a little.
They're going to twist it just to make it feel uncomfortable. But that was interesting.
One of the things that they said in the article I thought was interesting is they asked, so it was the president pro tem's appointment. He gets a certain number of appointments. It was his appointment, so he asked her for her resume.
Right.
The resume went to her, then go to the game control board, at least at first. And the big gotcha was, they asked one of the guys from the
game control, seen her resume.
And their answer was, no, we haven't seen her resume. Yeah, it was just a matter of course. So it was like, see, we got you.
But the other side of the coin is that the media nowadays is a 30-second or 30-minute.
Exactly.
It's just cycle and it's gone. So you don't see that's the only thing I saw in there.
We were prepared for it to some degree.
So you're enjoying that. You're going to get one more. Then personally, what's on your, let's say you do that. What's next for Fran Regan?
Well,
living that life of luxury.
Well, you just got to.
We're looking at the rudders down the road.
It's getting ugly here.
One of the things that we both really like to do is travel. So we're going to travel. While we were still relatively young and healthy, we just got this sprinter van. Like Mike said, we want to follow our youngest around for football games. But that's fine. I mean, the sky's the limit. But there are silly, goofy little things that I wanted to do that Mike's been like, oh, it's not a good time to do. Like, work at a pizza place, or
maybe you should own a pizza place.
I think we'd lose money on that. But anyway, I think we're going to spend a lot of time together. It's been rough being a politician. He's been a lot of times, they're busy during the evenings, holidays, things like that. So we're going to travel.
You're going to schedule in your Rough Mudders and your
absolutely still loving. Yes, I'm trying to find our next big thing like that. But the messier and the dirtier.
So go on and follow Jesse Itzler. He's got Everest that he does in his backyard. So you go up this hill that's forever, and you do it as many times.
Exactly, that's what Everest is.
Everest thing.
Tell me what the 60-year-old thing. 60.
Oh, right. Yes, I'm turning 60 in a couple of months, and because I'm trying to plan some adventures there. But we have the outdoor place where I teach boot camp every Tuesday and Thursday. We have a really nice big steep hill, and we're going to do that. Convince some of the other girls in my boot camp group to do that hill 60 times on my birthday.
Awesome.
So that takes about 3.5 hours. Mike has chosen to not join me for that, but he's going to come and cheer.
I like that.
Take care of it.
Committed to that cheerleading.
Yeah, so I have my little thing I do. My knees, I'd break my hip.
I tell you what, I wish I was about 30 years younger in today's world, because all the things that I would try and do, I feel so bad that I've spent my life grinding over the dollar. But just like this podcast, I'm writing a book, I'm doing some other things that are
you're doing it.
Not related, but they're not physical. They're not like, I wish I could run 100-mile or to do some of these things just to say I did it.
Yeah.
But you could still do that. Mike mentioned that Ironman.
We're going to wrap it up right now.
But I was 52 when I did that Ironman. We had no prior real training. We went from
they trained like crazy.
You're supposed to do the triathlons. There's different lengths you do. You do a sprint triathlon, you do a mid-distance, and we just went for the whole 9 yards. So don't count yourself out. I can help train you.
Thank you. All right, this has gotten better. So tell me, so you're going to do some of that. Obviously, you're going to drive the sprinter van. You're going to be another hero for her and support her on her way. You have 4 kids, like we talked about. One of them's in JMU, and to follow him around the country. I had a football guy myself, my son Brian, and so that is one thing in my life.
Brian was kind of a heartthrob around our house. I
was hoping for one of your daughters, but his wife is such a woman.
She's beautiful.
She's so smart and so, she's the perfect person.
So congratulations!
Very happy about that. But so I followed him around for the better part of 7 years. And that's the one thing in life I have no regrets about.
Absolutely.
So do that to all it's worth. Don't miss anything, because when it's over, then it's just you two. You got to love each other, and you already do. But I tell you, it was it's a great time.
I had a good time following Brighton's career too. He was a beast, man. He played with such an ed.
I appreciate that. He's got a good heart. He's both my boys have great hearts. They turned out to be great men. And that's the thing I'm most proud of. In a lot of ways, and this is not to cast any aspersions on any other parents out there, in a lot of ways I wished I would have not pushed them into sports.
Really?
Just because I think they missed out on some of the things that I'm now finding, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. And he spent a lot of time devoting his life to that sport.
It's all encompassing.
It's all encompassing.
I would have. I agree. I think I would have, because I played drums a little bit. I probably would have been in the jazz band at school or something like that, and maybe even like in the school play or whatever. But it wasn't. Is that news to you, Fran? After all these years,
the school play.
Because I think that you are kind of pigeonholed into something that
it's America.
Occupies your time.
It's America. They America says, if you do this and you do it well, we're going to pay you a lot of money. We're going to put you out on the field, and we're going to pay you more money than you can ever imagine. And the bottom line is, there's only less than 1% of the kids ever get to that.
If Brighton would have been 6'1", he probably would still be in the NFL.
Maybe, he's had some injuries that kept him out, and he couldn't crack that 4.5 40. He's always in the 4.6s. Lots of different things.
He played so fast, though. That was the thing about him. He was so twitchy.
Very twitchy. But Yeah. So tell me about what's next. We're going to move up 5 or 6 years. You're going to follow your kids.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself doing anything differently outside of your kids? I mean, you mentioned work at a pizza shop, but anything else in your world?
That's the only thing anyone's going to remember is you said you're going to work at a pizza shop. For me, I don't know. I every time I think about, relaxing in retirement, I spend a couple days at home and I'm ready to climb the walls. So I'm going to do something. I'll probably do we're definitely going to travel and do all those things, but I'll probably do some consulting, maybe some lobbying, something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And Fran, you're just going to continue doing what you're doing.
Well, we're
putting the hammer down. I mean, you've got lots of things in your future for sure.
Right. Yeah. And the self-defense classes, really gives me a lot of joy. I'm very proud of those. So
Tell me about that.
It's my best friend and I. We've been doing this for about 8 years, ever since I retired from probation.
F2, right?
F2 women's self-defense. Yeah. Yes. And we teach women how to be aware of their surroundings, less about karate chopping and hand-to-hand combat, more about, physical awareness and use of your body and body language and your voice and things like that. But I could certainly spend more time with that if I had more time.
So that's a big like for you. Love that, doing that.
Yes, absolutely.
That's something that she could franchise. That's such a great class. Everyone who takes it absolutely loves it. And that's something she could teach people how to teach it.
There, huh?
It is.
F2 women's
self-defense right here in Dillsburg.
Can travel anywhere. But I think really, when you ask about 5 years where I see the two of us, I mean, I'm never going to leave this house. All our kids were raised here and I'm born here. But we both love to travel. So that is one thing that's really, we want to go, there's a long list of places in the United States we want to go to.
Yeah. But you know what, we know too that we went on a trip to visit our daughter in Europe.
Yeah.
We were going to meet in Paris.
Yeah.
And we got held up because of an airline strike in Portugal. And we didn't speak the language. We were in the airport in Portugal, and there was a lot of hustling around and trying to get to where we wanted to be. And I thought to myself at that time, there's no way you could do this when you're 80 years old.
Oh,
So Fran's going to be 60. I'm 62. So there's this window of opportunity. So I think until we decide, hey, that's too much, we're going to do it.
Yeah, it's unnerving. And my parents are both turned 80, and they last 3 years or 4 years, they've taken a big, gigantic RV to Florida and Mexico and Arizona, whatever. And they spent some time in Florida this month and had a health issue. So they stayed down there for a few extra weeks. But I think to myself, they're 80 years old and they're still driving a 60-foot RV.
That's so cool.
Time to shut it down, guys. You're making me nervous, right?
That's so awesome.
So, but there is that window, especially if you're in good shape and you can do a lot of things physically ready to go. So that's good. That's interesting. If you had the attention of the entire world for 5 minutes, what would you say to them? Man,
I'll tell you what, I don't know if it would be something very poignant or succinct, but I think more about World War III now than I did when I was, a kid growing up during the Cold War.
Sure.
I think there's a bigger threat now. I see it kind of brewing, and I see it kind of being perpetuated by political desires and things like that. And it scares the heck out of me. And not so much for me because I've got to live a pretty long, full life, but I worry about my kids. And I don't think enough people are doing enough to try to prevent it. So if I could say something to the entire world, it would be something that I would come up with that would be pay attention. Let's not let this happen. This cannot happen. And I think we're kind of at a boiling point right now, which is frightening to me. It really is.
Yeah. Fran?
I'm sure I'm
eat more pizza.
A lot less. You're going to stress about that. One of the things that I think about now is I think that it's a shame to me that we have really kooky people on the left. We have some kooky people way on the right. And I think it's a shame that everybody else in the middle gets lost in that agenda. And I think if I had the world's attention, I would just say, let's all try to just gravitate more towards the middle and more about, finding common ground and less division. And I think that's a very, very hard thing to accomplish. But if everybody lived that way, wouldn't it be a lot nicer?
Yeah, sure would.
Yeah,
it would be.
Well, I want to thank you guys. I know this has been a little bit chilly out here, but it's been a nice conversation. And I'm glad you agreed to come and do this. It's nice to get another perspective from a partner of a person that's pretty public all the time. So it's nice to see what your views on things are. And I wish you the best in your
Thanks.
So
Appreciate
retirement.
you.
But your next stage of life sounds like it'll be fun. So thanks for taking the time to come on. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jerry. You're good at this. You made it easy.
Really are.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
So thanks for stopping in here to this episode of Grind to Growth to Greatness. I'm your host, Terry Barr. Tune in next week. We've got a great guest next week. You won't want to miss it. Thanks again. Welcome to Season 2.
You've been listening to the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. Our passion is to talk to the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes, anyone who's made it, and dive into their struggles, their successes, and their secrets. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Grind to Growth to Greatness. See you next time.